Chapter 12. Conception. The wedding rite had now taken place, but the young people did not simply hop into bed to engage in the wedding night activities we know about today, following a drunken spree. Their relatives did not make them lie in bed and then display the bloody sheep to the wedding guests the next morning, as has been done in many wedding rites, especially in the Caucasus. The young lovers went off, each to their respective parents' homes. They slept and then made their ablutions, and in the execution of this whole custom there is a great significance. The excitement associated with the approval of the domain's design quickly passed. The excitement associated with the wedding itself, where their attention was totally occupied with each other in a climax, may have had a pleasurable dimension, but it was still accompanied by a degree of nervous tension. At their parents' homes they rested and slept off the excitement, while, of course, still thinking about each other. 2 days later they experienced their first encounter as husband and wife, and by this time everything was ready for the conception of their child. It was not just a question of material benefits. The house, the warm enclosure for their animals, the vegetable garden and the orchard were all very important, of course. But equally important was the mental and physical state of the young couple. Radomir awoke before dawn, and without a word to anyone, he put on his garland and picked up his shirt that had been hand-embroidered by his mother. Then he headed off to the spring-fed stream. The moon illumined his path through the pre-dawn darkness, while garlands of stars twinkled in the heavens. After washing in the stream, he put on his shirt and quickly made his way to his sacred creation. The heavens began to brighten, and there he stood alone on the spot where the two villagers recently celebrated their joy, the place he created through his dream. The power of the feelings and sensations within a man at such a moment can scarcely be comprehended by anyone who has not experienced them for at least once for himself. It can be said that these sensations and feelings are divine in nature, and they have increased in quivering anticipation of the first ray of dawn, in which, there she is, his most marvellous Lubomila. Illumined by the dawn's rays, she ran to greet him and their co-creation. The vision incarnate ran to meet Radomir. While perfection, of course, knows no real limit, it seemed as though time had suddenly stopped for the two of them. Enveloped in the mist of their feelings, they entered their new home. The table was spread with delicacies, and a tempting fragrance of dried flowers wafted from the embroidered counterpane on the bed. "What are you thinking about right now?" she asked him in a heated whisper. "About him, our future child." And Radomir gave a quiver as he looked at Lubomila. "My, how beautiful you are!" No longer able to contain himself, he very tenderly touched her shoulder and cheek. It was not just that Lubomila and Radomir felt a joy in their hearts. They kept looking at each other in silent delight. "My husband," Lubomila whispered to herself without making a sound. "My husband, I thank heaven and the whole universe. O righteous God, what happiness you give to people. The happiness of living a life in love." "My wife," Radomir thought as he looked at Lubomila. He closed his eyes and opened them again, so as to see her all of a sudden afresh, as though she were the best vision in the world, as though the most important goddess in the world had appeared before him. But it was not just as though he saw the goddess Lubomila before him. Radomir saw a goddess in real life. The warm breath of love enveloped the twosome and carried them away to heights unknown. Nobody in a million years will ever be able to describe in detail what occurs between him and her when people merge. I've got that turned the wrong way round. Let me just turn it around this way. I think so, anyway. Oh gosh. I'm gonna have to cut that bit out. I can't remember where I was up to.
Merge.
when people merge together into one for the purposes of co-creation and bring forth the image of themselves and of God in a mutual impulse of love. But the God people of the Vedras culture knew for certain that when two people are joined together by an unexplainable miracle, each of them subsequently maintains his or her individuality. At the same time, the universe shudders at that unexplainable moment upon seeing the vision of the infant soul tripping barefoot through the stars, making its way to the earth, thereby embodying in itself the twain, plus a third in one. The dawn progressed into a happy day, and the sun was rising over the earth. It shone more brightly with its delicate ray on the spot where the gods stood on the earth, and the energy of love, God's gift to the earthly gods, illuminated them with a light greater than the sun, invisible, radiating blessings. And the energy of love celebrated in joy. Is this energy intelligent? It is. Like all feelings, particles of mind, it was considered by God to be the most important of all. When the grand creation of the earth was given birth by God, he told love, "Hasten, my love, hasten. Do not stop for rational contemplation. Hasten with your last spark. Envelop them with your great energy of grace, all my future sons and daughters in your embrace." And now, when Luba Miller and Radomir's conception took place in love, love called out to God, "You are invisible, great creator, but your children are visible. I too was invisible. Now my reflection on the faces of your children I see. They are yours, and in a way mine to be. I want to nurse their children and understand how you, great creator, were able to foresee when you gave to them as a gift from you the whole of me. How you could likewise foresee earthly grace. Show yourself in all your beauty and grandeur for all your children to see." God responded to love in a whisper of a barely noticeable breeze. "I myself would not presume to distract my children from their grand and inspired co-creation. And I beg you, my love, do not burn these young hearts in an impulse of your own delight. I remember how with the grace of your energy you once set me alight. I feel you are also burning our children with your delight. My God, I do not burn, I only warm them. When you said our children, I gave just a little shudder, and for a moment my energy in turn increased in me. But I restrained them. I declined to burn them. You distinctly said our children, which means they must also be, at least a little bit, mine. Those who were born in love will understand who their mother and father are." It might not be easy, Vladimir, to understand, but you must try. The intimate relations involved were by no means the lead factor in the Vedras conception of children. What people do in bed today, calling it lovemaking, is a mere mockery of love and a debasement of God. The satisfaction of fleshly needs lasts but for a moment, and I would venture to say that it cannot compare with even 100th part of what has been determined in God's plan for man. The Vedras people did not see each other as an object of fleshly desire. They saw something quite different altogether. When the desire came to Luba Miller and Radomir to create a child, they did not see him as being separate from themselves. The culture of feelings was quite different in those times. The husband and wife, in their love, saw in each other their own child, and subsequently their caresses were quite different from today. People were not drawn to each other by the passion of copulation, but by the grand aspiration to co-creation. And Radomir embraced Luba Miller almost as his own child. He tenderly stroked her hair with his hand, touched her supple breasts, gently caressed her shoulders and kissed the palms of her hands. Her hands touched his face and his shoulders. She tenderly clasped him by the neck and drew him to her breast as though comforting a child. There are many treatises in the world which try to teach the subject of intimate copulation, but there never has been and never will be a treatise capable of outlining the Vedrus approach to conception. The lovers' bodies were not the focus of attention. The bodies simply carried out people's will and desire. People at that moment found themselves living in a different dimension. When the great and worthy act was accomplished, they returned to the earth. The satisfaction they derived was no fleeting fancy. It remained with them eternally, as though lifting man one step higher in the direction of divine perfection. At the actual moment of conception, Radomir seemed to be in a state of oblivion, as though he had not yet returned from a dimension he had never known before. He kissed Lubomila as though she were his own child and fell asleep in a blissful dream. Men cannot help but fall asleep, perhaps because of an innate desire to return there once again. But Lubomila did not sleep. She felt within herself, or so it seemed, an extraordinary particle of being. She rose from the bed and went over to the window, where the sun was streaming through, dividing the windowsill into bright and shady sections. Lubomila ran over the line with her finger where the light and dark met. She took off the flaxen ribbon encircling her wrist and put it on the same line. The Vedrus people always marked the day and moment of conception. Then on the spot where the wedding took place, they planted a tree whose trunk would be sure to grow straight. A second tree was planted at the moment when the border between light and dark coincided with the flaxen ribbon marking on the windowsill. The second tree was planted in the shadow of the first. This act allowed them to forever remember the moment at which they conceived the child. A horoscope calculated from this point will always be more accurate. The Vedrus people knew about the positioning of the planets and their influence on the flesh. Nevertheless, in spite of the planets, they were able to accomplish successful deeds, since it was a great energy that they possessed. Subsequently, they poured the birthing water there and buried the placenta there in the earth, and when he got older, a man would go to sleep in the same spot on the anniversary of his conception. The position of the planets slightly varied from year to year, and a man could feel all the information coming from the cosmos on the night of such a sleep, not with his mind, but rather with his feelings, in his subconsciousness, right up to God's creation of everything earthly. And if there were any sorrow or disease, the dream could eliminate it on the spot with ease. But only very rarely could any disease of the flesh affect the Vedrus people. The place of conception served them as a place to sleep and to become consciously aware of the whole order of the universe. End of chapter 12.